Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, the capital of northern BC. It's a beautiful day in BC, still as you can see in the background. A little bit of snow, but spring is around the corner, we hope. Today's special guests, two special guests in fact, it's Dan McLaren and Roberta McLaren. Welcome to the show.
Pleased to be here, John, and congratulations. It's really a success how your show's developed over the last couple of years. Well done. Good for you.
Podcasting is amazing, right? And how it spreads all over the world.
Yeah.
The unique thing about it right now is, since you brought it up on the podcasting, you can see right across from you we have also a screen that some of our podcasts are now done virtual. And we are interviewing people from Sweden, Holland, Central Europe, United States, all over the place.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. You know, it's...
and on important issues.
And on important issues. Yeah. So, Dan, I have known you for a few years, like about 25 or 30.
Well, I think it's actually been longer than that, John, but okay, we'll stick with 25 or 30.
Yeah. So, and you've been in Prince George for a long time. You were from the island originally.
Well, originally, like yourself, I was born in Europe.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yes, my bit of background. My father, who was born in BC, at the time was living in the Okanagan, was a very good soccer player. And he was drafted by the old Seattle Sounders.
Okay.
And he moved to the United States in the early 60s. And he played for them when they paid $25 a practice and $50 a game. But,
oh my God.
But while he lived there, in those days, as you may recall, that the U.S. Army would draft. The draft was very much alive in the 1960s in the U.S. So he was drafted into the U.S. Army. And he did his basic training in California. And he eventually, fortunately, was not sent to Vietnam. He was sent to Germany.
Right.
And my mom, who was born in Germany, but was raised in Australia, but went back to Europe because she was bilingual. She could speak German and English. Yeah. She got a job at the U.S. Army base. So my dad was the company clerk in a medical unit, and she was his typist. So that's where I was born, actually.
So how long were you there then?
Not long, about 6 months. But you have this, it's almost like a law school question. You had a Canadian dad in the American Army, stationed in Germany, marries an Australian of German descent. Yeah. What nationality's the kid?
Yeah.
So for the first 3 months, my mom would joke, no one would take me. Yeah. But eventually Canada does, because like you and I both know, we made it here okay.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
From there, we moved to actually to the United States for a short period of time. My father got demobilized out of the Army. Right. And then to Australia, and then back to Canada again. So onto the island of Victoria.
Yeah.
So started in Europe. Went down to the South Pacific, and then back to British Columbia again. But my formative years were all on Vancouver Island, and I lived in Campbell River, and went to University of Victoria. Yeah. And I worked for Coast Hotels, and that's what moved me up here.
What did you do for Coast Hotels?
I was the
there's so much about you that I didn't even know.
I was the regional sales manager for Central and Northern British Columbia. And so I worked out of the end of the north, but also out of the Kamloops properties. And my job was to talk business people when they traveled through the hotel chain to stay at a coast property. And they were terrific employers. And I really enjoyed my time there. But that's how I came to Prince George. But it was a circuitous route. But here we are, and I've never looked back. I just think...
So what background did you have in terms of, you went to university or to college?
Yeah, political science is my undergraduate degree.
Right.
And so really it's great at cocktail parties, but doesn't really land you a job doing much of anything. And then my background was in sales. Our family had a grocery store, which we subsequently sold. I managed,
in Campbell River?
In Campbell River.
Yeah.
And at those times, independent grocery stores weren't having an easy go of it.
Yeah.
So, I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors with the manager of the Coast Discovery Inn in Campbell River, and he offered me a job. And it was a great opportunity. And when they offered to move up north, I was really excited by it.
When was what year?
1988. It was actually December of '87.
Yeah.
Which meant my first. So I came up here for New Year's of '87, and I reported for work in January of '88, literally over the Christmas break.
Yeah. And so, and you were still with Coast then?
Yep, when I came up, and I worked for Coast at that time for probably about another year. And then one of my clients was the Royal Bank, and they offered me a job working for the bank in commercial lending.
Was John Weems there then? Or?
Yeah, John Weems was the regional executive.
Yeah.
They didn't call it a vice president then. It was the regional executive manager.
Right.
And he's kind of a legend in northern BC in the Royal Bank. A great guy.
Yeah.
And that's when the bank trained me in Prince George and posted me to Vanderhoof, and I came back to Prince George, and they were a great employer and a great corporate citizen in Prince George.
So how long were you with the Royal Bank?
A little better than 7 years.
Yeah.
And at that time I decided I wanted to own my own business.
Commercial lending?
Yeah, my background was all in commercial lending.
Yeah.
And so a big change for me was when I opened my own little private lending and mortgage brokerage business, was getting into personal lending.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, Commonwealth. And we do Commonwealth. We do commercial.
Why'd you call it Commonwealth?
It was, I'll tell you, it's funny. There's
another story.
Dinner at Earl's. And a friend of mine, Gordon Langer, who was one of our original shareholders.
I know him.
We're having dinner, and he had his wife with him. And we're saying, what are we going to name this company? And we didn't know. And she was from Virginia. And her father was a state legislator. And she was from the Commonwealth of Virginia. And she always thought that was an interesting name. And I looked at her, I said, that's the name, because it speaks to a collective betterment.
Yeah.
And it speaks to wealth, which we manage, as you know, for people.
Yeah.
So, and that's where Commonwealth came from. It was from a daughter of a Virginia state legislator that proposed it.
Can you imagine how this happens, this stuff?
Yeah, it's serendipitous.
Yeah. Now I want to talk to Roberta a little bit here, because you guys are married, and you were born in Prince George,
born
right?
and raised, yeah.
Yeah, and I know you from that you were quite involved in commerce here and did a lot of things in Prince George.
Yeah.
You got your MBA from University of Northern British Columbia.
I did.
You were involved with TELUS.
Yeah.
I remember, but you also were involved in real estate and a number of, you were quite entrepreneurial. Still are likely, but from how I know you.
That's one way of calling it, entrepreneurial, or just looking for the next exciting thing. So,
right.
And there's always so much opportunity in a town like Prince George, so why not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and great people to do stuff with, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's never a shortage of that.
And so with TELUS, what were you doing with them?
I was the GM for TELUS for all of northern BC and
Right.
part of southern BC. It was a huge area, so it kept me out of town a lot.
Yeah.
And this is just when Dan and me decided that we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, so it was kind of hard. So I knew it wasn't where I wanted to stay.
No.
It didn't work for the life that we wanted to have together. So I
Right.
did some other work for them. I did some strategy stuff and some northern BC specific stuff.
Yeah.
Because they're great and they're a great corporate citizen, but they're very light in the north.
Yeah.
Obviously, because the majority of the people are down south, like in big
Obviously.
metropolitans. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did some time doing some studies for them for that, and then we parted ways, and it was just after we got married, so it was nice in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then now you are also, correct me if I'm wrong, involved in Commonwealth?
Yeah, I'm helping out for a while.
Yeah.
Dan's taking advantage of my communications background and the social
Right.
media, and building up some systems and CRMs for him. Not that he didn't have it.
No.
His business is a fine-tuned machine, and it's
Yeah.
excellent. But there's always little tweaks.
Yeah.
Dan's a very traditional man, and so I'm trying to bring him to the 22nd century a little bit more. So, but slowly.
Yeah.
So, but it's going great. You don't want to wreck a really good thing. Like, you don't need to change a really good thing. So, but he's allowing me to make some tweaks, and in doing that, I got my mortgage broker license and life insurance. I'm involved in that right now in the sense of learning, just so I can understand his business better.
It's already fitted you, because I remember you and me talking about a property that you were involved in trying to develop. They are developing. That was how many years ago?
Oh,
10 years ago, maybe.
At least. Yeah.
Because you always kind of looked at it as a property that had great potential.
I thought it was 2012 or 13, because it was the last undeveloped big lot in that downtown bowl
Right.
that my sister and me ended up owning in partnership with Big Group and we wanted to develop it.
Yeah.
And so that would have made a great MBA project, but the timing wasn't there. I went into the MBA after it, but it did get sold off just to liquidate some cash flow for the big group, and so we kind of missed that opportunity to develop it. But I'm sure glad when I drive by it now that it is getting some sort of development. So
yeah, I don't know exactly what you're doing, but it's always been a kind of a unique property that had potential. But with those kind of properties, is always timing is critical.
Always.
Right?
You're the expert on that.
Yeah, I'm trying
You're the expert on that. Yeah.
It's all about timing.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
But so that always what I thought, like in your case, that, you very involved in the community and obviously very involved in those kind of projects and quite involved with other things in the community.
Yeah, I think to date, besides working with Dan, I think my favorite thing was when I was the CEO of United Way of Northern BC.
Yeah.
Because I really got to see the really good side of people. Not that I can't anyways, but the giving and the people helping other people when they're down and out.
Yeah.
And from all aspects of Northern BC, because we got a motorhome, we wrapped it with all these great pictures, and we drove for 3 months, and we went to 86 First Nation areas. We went to all the major cities, towns, and municipalities. We sat and spoke to every regional district, police departments, and said, what are your major concerns right now? Just to get a real beat from all of these areas. It was an eye-opener. And
all the way from Williams Lake to the Yukon border, all the way from
Haida
Kitimat
Gwaii,
to Valemount.
And all of it. It was amazing, but it took us 3 months.
How long were you with them, Roberta?
United Way, 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, approximately 4 years. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great. I was actually the senior commercial loans officer for HSBC, and they kind of headhunted me out of there.
Yeah.
And it was right at a time where, regretfully, my mother was in a critical time or stage in her life.
I remember talking to you about that.
Yeah, it was a tough time for me. My mom was my best friend.
Yeah.
And it's been 7 years now that she's passed. Dad reminded me. Yeah. Oh.
How time goes by so quick.
I know.
Yeah.
So from there I went into the United Way nonprofit realm, and that was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then TELUS headhunted me out of that job.
Right.
And
so did you already do your MBA then, or you did it about the same time as Scott did?
Exactly. Right? We were cohorts.
Yeah.
We're cohorts. I think I was number 2 on Helia, or number 3, I think.
But were you guys doing your courses when I did quite a few presentations to the MBA class about entrepreneurship?
You know what? I would remember you, John, giving a lecture. I really would. So I have to say, unfortunately, no, we didn't have the pleasure of you coming in to lecture. So
yeah, but it was very, very. I'm a great believer in what they're doing at UNBC. Obviously, an amazing project, right?
Yeah.
So then, how long? We started working together when?
Well, we first met each other on the Social Credit Board of Directors back in the so there you go. For all the young people watching this right now, they're going to go, "What does that mean?" So that's a long time ago. And then I guess we both had political aspirations at the same time, so we kind of our paths somewhat passed there. And then we started.
Was I writing president? I was writing president, for Socrates by accident. How that all happened, I just want to tell you that it's amazing in a way. Actually, is that Dennis Jackson and Judy?
Yes.
They this was 1983. So I knew Dennis because of what he was doing. I think he was working for one of the companies that was doing forklift trucks or something like that. And he said to me, and I was mainly working hands-on in the mill, from grease from top to bottom. I didn't go anywhere, that's all I did is work at the mill, And, they invited me they said, well, Dennis said to me, why don't you go with me tonight? It's Friday night, and the Socrates have a thing, and and maybe something you like. And I said, okay. So I went with him, and I was sitting there with Judy and Dennis, and it was the AGM, and and they were talking about this, that, and the other thing, and I'm just kind of taking this all in. And then they were electing a president for the writing, and he said,
"Don't show up at the meetings unless you want a title."
So Dennis said, I'm nominating John. I said, Jesus, what happened? And then they said, before you know, yeah, okay, blah, blah, and I'm the president
of the riding. Yeah.
Just
of the
like
riding.
that. Wow.
And I was that for right up to the time that we ran.
Right. Well, and Bruce Strachan,
Yeah.
he was the MLA at that time.
Correct,
I
yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
For Prince George Valemount.
Yeah, or what do they call it then? Was that a different name?
Prince George South,
North or
maybe,
Prince
yeah?
George? Yeah.
I don't know.
I forget the name. But yeah, Bruce was our MLA at that time. I still keep in touch with Bruce regularly.
Yeah, I like him too.
Yeah, great
Yeah.
guy. And, sometimes when I see the current government, I wish those old Soulcrate guys were back again. So
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. Maybe this isn't a political show.
No, it's not. It's apolitical.
It's apolitical. Okay, then
Yeah. I invite them all.
yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah.
No, but we worked on Bruce's campaign, and then you ran for the BC Liberal nomination in Prince George, what's now Prince George Valemount.
Yeah.
And I ran
Against
Shirley Bond.
Shirley Bond.
And I ran against Pat Bell and Preet Sandhu. There was three of us on the
Yeah.
ballot, and Prince George Mackenzie. So how different our lives would have been if those nomination results would have been different.
Yeah, and it would not have been good necessarily, because I'm glad. I think I lost to Shirley by 36 vote, would have been the swing.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that was the
Yeah,
swing.
and that it was very, very close, and it was a very one of those gloves off kind of a campaign. Yeah. No, it wasn't. It actually, I'm interviewing Shirley. I think maybe even tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Nice. So she's a friend, and I'm glad she got in.
Well, it's an awful lot of work in these from all parties. Yeah. I don't think the average person understands the hours that are put in by an MLA, and if you make it into cabinets, it just doubles everything. Yeah. So I have all my political jokes aside, whatever party you belong to put your name on a ballot is a big deal.
It's
I think it gives you the right to complain.
Yeah.
So when someone says, well, if you don't like it, put your name on a ballot, you can say, well, I did.
Walk the talk.
Yeah, I did. And so I appreciate everybody who runs. And we all have our proclivities as to who we'd like to see elected. But it's tough. And it's a tough time now. I mean,
and it takes all the time that you have available. Like in my case, if I would have been elected, I would have lost my operation. I would not have. I couldn't do both.
right.
But it was one of those things that you have to. At some point, you have to walk the talk, right? And so we both did, and so for me, it was an amazing experience. I liked it. Going through the campaign and everything around it, including the losing never comes easy, but I think
it makes you stronger in some respects.
Yeah, it makes you stronger.
Yeah,
but I've always been, as you have, involved in politics, both provincially and to a certain extent federally.
Yes.
And and it's very much part of my life and directly.
Well, it affects us, especially if you look at forestry, something which you've forgotten more than most of us will ever know. But at the end of it, I mean, if how we manage our forest is really set by our political and administrative framework.
Yeah.
And that's, look around up here. This is Prince George.
Yeah.
So if you don't take an interest in those public affairs and how we manage our forest, and to my mining friends in the mining business and back east in the fisheries business, I mean, if you don't look at those things through a political lens from time to time, you will end up with results that you probably don't like.
No, and they are still the economic, or have the potential, the economic drivers, not only of the province, but also of the regions. And obviously we're going through a bit of a struggle there right now.
For sure.
It's an industry in transition, and in my opinion. But what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is that your specialty was somewhat unique, and we knew each other well. I was an entrepreneur, building a company, going, starting with our famous John Weems, who gave me $25,000.
Was that the original loan?
Yeah. So I went to the bank. I did my proposal and business proposal, and I dropped it off at all the banks in town, and they all turned me down. And except two showed a little bit of interest. And then the last one was the Royal Bank, and I kept modifying my business plan, and and then went back again to them for the 12th time, and I forget now who was the fellow that was looking at it. He said, okay, okay, well, let me take it to John again, and so John then was sitting in the ground floor in the far corner.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And then in between they had these dividers, and I was sitting there and waiting, and then all of a sudden I heard is, give him the money, give him the money. $25,000 to start this forest company, Brink Forest Products. And I said, oh my God, what do I do now?
But were you doing the laminating then, John? Like, was this like, was your business model then the same fundamental business model?
Finger jointing, yeah.
Okay.
I had to find a niche. Well, the problem that I had with my business plan, it was a good plan, it was well done. Actually, my team looks at it and they say, well, Ken, amazing, we still have the same plan, even today, and
Nice.
but the problem with the business plan is that I had a good plan, but I had no money.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing.
And so the 25,000 I got, and I leased a property, a mill, same location as where I am now, and I had to find another way of doing something. So the one way I looked at is taking lower quality lumber, low grades, they call them, or economy grade, cut it up into, that had defects in it, cut it up into making longer pieces out of it. The problem was other people had tried that, but they ended up with too many short pieces, with no place to go. And so I had been exposed to what they call finger jointing,
Yes.
putting grooves on either side, and then putting glue in it and tie them all together. And I introduced that into Canada because that was the only way I could make some. I had to create a product that nobody else was doing, and that became unique. Little did I know there were no standards for it.
Right.
You couldn't even use the product the way I had, and I could write a book about that alone.
And not all the consumers probably were that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember a funny story you told me that one of your first buyers who bought your wood, I think it was an American fellow from Texas. And
Yeah.
It was like, it's firewood glued together.
Yeah.
is how he hooked it up. And now you pay a premium for that product.
Substantial premium.
So, there's something about just teaching the consumer what sometimes they don't know what they want.
Yeah.
You have something that you think is inferior,
Yeah.
but then you put 2 or 3 decades of actually using the product,
Right.
seeing how it makes a better quality construction project at the end
The
of the day.
challenge is, how do you get through that first 20 years, right?
Well, it's not easy.
And all of a sudden there are no standards, and then and then to develop standards on the federal level, is a major challenge.
Especially if you're exporting, of course, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And but in any event, that happened, and then but in the meantime, that and one of your specialties is your business. The way I always looked at it is become complementary to the entrepreneur, that is trying to build and is always looking for money in some form or fashion, or mortgages, or in insuring, and all of that stuff, that whole package. And that's always kind of how I looked at you and Commonwealth.
We informally bill ourselves as private banking.
Yeah.
And so if you need money, and some places it's very easy to get a car loan or a residential mortgage, that's actually fairly straightforward. But sometimes, in the case of the entrepreneur, we have to sit down with that, especially a business startup, and say, like you did with John Weems, and however many times you went back to the branch, let's take a look at that business plan. Are we going to be able to sell it? And we're able to sit there and give the borrower a very candid opinion. Here's what the bank is going to say when they look at this.
Yeah.
You've got a really good plan, but you don't have any collateral.
Yeah.
Or you got really good collateral, but you've got no cash flow.
Yeah.
And here's the coverage ratios, all the stuff that the committed entrepreneur just says, I'm a smart guy or gal, I've got a great business idea, and I just need the money and get out of my way. I said, okay, well, I will coach you or build it with you or type it up. Then I'll go to the bank and I will pitch them for you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, your ideas have to sell themselves.
Yeah.
But there's, you get a bank manager who's got 20 deals on his desk. And so hopefully we talk their lingo, and when they say that, that you spoke about insurance and pricing and estate planning, because all of these things, especially to a smaller operation, if you're Canfor, you don't have to have an estate plan because you're a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
But if you're a successful small business that wants to become a successful big business, you got to touch all of those things a bit.
Yeah.
So, like you created your market niche, something a little bit different. We're not the only people that can get money or sell insurance, but we'd like to think our value add is that we can do all of those things a little bit differently than where you can find it anywhere else. So, and it's our 27th year this year.
Yeah.
So we've obviously done something, right?
No question. The key is always, for the most common questions that people ask me is that I want to build a business, but how do I do it? How do I get it off the ground, and what should it look like? And and so what? And I always remember it was about a couple of years ago. I do quite a few presentations to entrepreneurial people that aspire to do something, and so I was part of a panel, and so we listened to these fellows making their presentation. And this one fellow said, he had this great idea. He went to the bank and they turned him down. So that in his mind, he said, the banks, are the problem for entrepreneurs. They have no idea, and they don't want to go along with proposals that you make. And so I said to him, how often did you go to the bank? Well, he said he went once,
Right.
And he said, okay, and then what? Well, he said, that you can't do these kind of things because they don't do that. So then I had to tell him that what I did. I went to every single bank. I got turned down by every single one.
And you probably learned a little bit about each one. He said, we don't like your collateral package, or your, and then you prove
Tweak
and you
it.
modify, you tweak, you go, okay.
And that's
there's
what
a
you
learning
do.
curve, you bet.
And you stay the course, right? And then you learn as an starting entrepreneur to understand the financial community as to how they work and what they need and what they require in order to bring something forward. And it's one of the things that is still something that is not very well understood in a general sense, and access to it is sometimes difficult to find.
I think even from a cellular level, you have to think the difference between your example and this young man's example, and I hope he's now got that help and everything in the bank and stuff, is that you didn't take no for an answer.
No.
It's a mentality. Dan didn't take no for an answer. I didn't take no for an answer.
Right.
You kept asking different people.
That's the key.
Till someone said yes.
Yeah.
So it could be banking, it could be education, it could be anything. Just
Anything.
don't accept no.
Yeah. And the lender isn't just going to look at you and say, boy, you got a good idea. They're saying, are you able to execute?
Yeah.
Did you show up with an idea on the back of a napkin, or did you show up well presented? Did you have a nicely done did you have all of your ducks in a row? And now we're talking business. We're not talking about approach.
No.
And if every battle, Sun Tzu, right? Every battle is won or lost before it's ever fought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're going to go in and
Exactly.
talk to that bank manager and you say, I've got these shareholders lined up to support me.
Yeah.
I've got this collateral package here. I
Yeah.
expect the market to look like this. I've got my licenses tentatively approved.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden he's going to go, wow, you've got a shot at this.
Exactly.
If you just show up and say, hey, I got a great idea, he's going to go, great. Next, what do you want? You'd be surprised, John, how many people show up looking for a loan that don't even know how much they want.
Yeah.
I want to start a new business. You'll explain the business. And you'll say, well, great. What's your ask? My father was a bank manager. He had a great line.
Yeah.
A guy came in to see him, and this was like in the late 60s, right?
Yeah.
Guy came in to see him, and he explained his business model, and he said, how much money are you putting into this? He says, nothing. Well, to beat my dad, said, well, I'll match you.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
So part of it is like, if he would have taken some time to learn about how to get it done, a good banker will spend time coaching a good client.
Yeah.
But excellent clients will go in there and coach a good banker.
Yeah.
Here's what you need. I know what your collateral proposals are, and if you go in there well educated, then I think that's 3/4 of the battle.
Yeah.
Now, if people are listening, and we have a lot of people that listen to these programs, and in particular look at business or entrepreneurship or business in a general way and banking in a general way, if you kind of look back in the last 25, 30 years, What has changed?
Local lending authorities, to my way of thinking, John, is the single biggest change. When I left the Royal Bank in 1995, I actually had a $200,000 lending limit. I could personally approve $200,000.
Yeah.
And I could walk up, I worked on the second floor, and I could walk up to the third floor and talk to the guy who could personally hook one guy, and we had three of them.
Yeah.
But any one of those three guys could hook a $5 million deal.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what up to $5 million. Today, none of that is around.
No.
In fact, it's discouraged. With some of the new banking regulation, in the old days, I would want to take our loans approval people and take them into the field to look at the locking operation, to meet the borrowers face to face, to shake their hand, have a cup of coffee at the farmer's table. And I've done all of those things.
And the people that you're talking about now, or what the bank is referring to, our risk department has to analyze the loan, and then the risk department has no name or no face.
Right.
But that is normal.
It is, but what's changed is in the old days we'd want that rich people to meet the people they're lending to, and I thought
on the local level,
on a local level, and these were people with a real lending limit, so they could walk out and they could do 95% of our businesses and approve the credit. Yeah. They also went to the same Chamber of Commerce dinner that they did. Their kids went to the same high school.
They're part of the community.
They were part of the community.
Yeah.
And banking regulations changed, where they actually didn't want credit approval officers to actually get to know the clients. They wanted to be a silo-wide on purpose because
to take the emotion
out of it. I know this client really good. We used to call them gut loans.
Yeah.
Look, at this. You gave the client a $1 million overdraft for a week, and he doesn't fit our margin requirements. He'll go good.
Yeah.
He always has.
Yeah.
That's not. They don't want that anymore. They want
on purpose.
And there's Basel Accord is the way banks are regulated and how they have to analyze their money. There's the international banking standards have become very domesticated, where in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the local lending branch would actually have a limit, and we could argue if it was big or small.
Yeah.
And I could pick up a phone to Vancouver and get that bumped up.
Yeah.
All of that is intentionally designed to make it harder because they don't want banks making emotional decisions. They want it based, and there's tiered ratios and formulas that weren't around before. So what we're seeing, and I'm not saying this in a pejorative sense, but we're seeing banks have become much more institutionalized than what they already were.
Right.
And that small town branch manager, they've taken away his or her authority.
Yeah.
Now, as a result of all of that, especially when we talk today, after just today, when we had a couple of bank failures in the United States, that in Canada, for all intents and purposes, I can only remember 2 bank failures that we had here. The one was Home Bank, and the other one was Northland Bank.
Yeah. And Northland had a branch here at one time, too.
I know. I was a client. And he said, "Hey, how are you doing?" "I'm good. You have no more loans here. Have a nice day."
Wow. Yeah, that would not be good. Yeah. In Canada we have a branch banking system. The U.S. has a unit banking system.
Right.
So when we have, if one part of Canada is suffering, they think of the fisheries in the Maritimes. They can be offset by the fact that the rest of the country will keep our system afloat because our population is small, but we have a hugely well capitalized banking industry, and which is why I would sometimes argue that some of these more recent changes they've made really weren't needed coming because they're fairly odious that we see today. We even look at timely right now that we have the Silicon Valley Bank that's gone under, but interesting, they have no bad loans.
No.
They are a profitable bank with no bad loans, right?
But it was not a question of bad loans.
It wasn't.
Because
which it usually
they had no money.
Right. They had a run on the depositors. So people who used to borrow said, "No, I'll deplete my deposits.
Yeah.
So I don't need a loan anymore, thanks."
So $45 billion in one day.
Right. But if there's a mismatch, right, all banks are is they take, Roberta's deposit money and lend it to your business.
Yeah.
And if all of a sudden Roberta says, "I want all my money back," and they can't legally call your loan, they have a mismatch, right?
Yeah.
And that funding arrangement is what went sideways. Actually, I get nervous when there's bad loans because there's a moral hazard issue here.
Right.
When you look at SVB, it was actually a pretty well-run bank. The problem is it's undercapitalized.
Right.
So in Canada, if the Toronto branch of the TD Bank all of a sudden lost a $4 billion deposit, they wouldn't like that, and they'd be pretty upset by that, and somebody would maybe get fired if it was a client service issue, but they're still meeting payroll on Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so because we have our system isn't micro-regionalized. If you're a regional bank in Kansas and you have a bad corn crop, your bank's struggling. Not because you got bad people you lend to, it's because you got a bad corn crop.
Yeah.
So, and Canada doesn't really have that issue. Even our provincially regulated financial institutions, we have provincial trusts and we have provincial credit unions who manage that. They're very, very well capitalized. So in Canada, we've developed world leadership in our financial institutions.
Yeah.
So on that front, like in 2008, when the rest of the world was getting beat up, you know, we were okay. We were pretty good.
Yeah.
The market took a hit. As the market's taking a hit today, as I left the office, we're down 358 points on the stock exchange.
And Dow Jones?
Yeah, well, in Toronto Stock Exchange.
Okay.
So, you know, but what does that tell you though, right? We didn't have a bad bank go bad. But everybody, you know, the world's small, right? Everybody feels it. But I say this, there's some bargains out there today. If you're, you know, is it a good time to sell or a good time to buy? It's a better time to buy stocks today than it is to sell. But having said that, we're very fortunate in Canada. So, but, you know, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that would like to hear yes a lot more time than they're probably hearing today.
Yeah. One of the ways I kind of look at it is that we all kind of looked at what happened in the United States, and obviously that is worrisome because that what was the reason and how will the rest of the market react to it? And the initial reaction was that it was negative, and then I think I don't mind Biden, you know, much better than the other guy was the big name.
The name we don't say.
Yeah, we don't even want to mention.
He should not be named.
So I think he did some good things in terms of, you know, reacting very, very quickly to protecting the lenders, not the shareholders, but the lenders in terms of, you know, beyond. The
depositors,
and depositors. You know, so in the market, at least the Dow, when I looked this morning, was reacting to that not negatively, and you know, but there's quite a few things going on right now, and you know, obviously inflation is an issue. You know, we see it going down slowly, but we don't want to see the Fed rate. And I'm thinking, I always talk about the United States, not so much Canada, but you know, if the Federal Reserve keeps putting the foot on the brake, then that will slow down the economy even more, and housing starts, and that means the forest industry.
Absolutely. Well, if you're going to sell lumber, I mean, housing starts is there any bigger indicator?
Yeah.
If inflation, and last June we were over 8%, December we're at 5.9%, so in Canada it's going in the right direction, and the U.S. has parallel numbers.
Yeah.
What the issue was 10 days ago was that Chairman Powell has announced that inflation in the U.S. was not slowing down as much as they wanted. So it's there, and they expected to see a bigger drop. And then he said, we may have to return to another round of increased interest rates. So, and put that in perspective, like we've all lived, and I tell my clients, when they are complaining about their 4% mortgage, I say, sit down with your mom and dad who paid a 17 or 18% mortgage, and you'll feel pretty lucky.
You remember that well.
But here's what is a little bit different, is that the average consumer got approved in the last 5 years using a 2% mortgage.
Yeah.
And now they're going up to somewhere just south of 6%.
Yeah.
Your mortgage costs, your interest costs have tripled.
Yeah.
300%.
Yeah.
And so if your mortgage is maturing in the next 120 days, you've better give some thought to, can you pay that mortgage down?
Yeah.
Or can you re-amortize it? Or what can you do to keep the payments the same? Because we're not really hardwired for tripling our interest rates in less than a year. So
one of the things that I don't fully understand, Dan, is, and that's all we're going to talk about on that part, but, you know, like, if I look in the United States and here, the cost of homes have gone up so substantially, like, you know, like even in our subdivisions, house prices are, approaching $1 million, right? 900, 800,000.
You have an exceptionally good. Your subdivision is quite renowned too for being above average,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To be fair,
Yeah. But saying that prices have gone up substantially,
Yeah.
would there not be merit in longer term mortgages, 30 to 50-year mortgages? Because most people will never own their house anyway, and who cares? Like, I'm thinking Europe in particular.
Yeah.
If I look at Holland, most people don't own their house.
In the United States, the average mortgage, and they do have shorter ones, there's 30 years, 30-year amortization, 30-year term. The shorter terms, when interest rates were high, the shorter terms became popular because they were just so high.
Yeah.
Up until one of our suppliers isn't around anymore, First Line Mortgages, a division of the CIBC, they used to offer 15, 20, 25-year terms. And I think that if the federal regulators wanted to really, because they make it very tough, because whatever your current rate is, we have to prove you 2% higher.
Yeah.
So if you say today's mortgage rate is 5, I have to prove you it's 7.
Okay.
Right. So that's because that's a stress test that's required under the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions.
Yeah.
So a lot of people who could afford a mortgage before now can. That will force some downward pressure on prices, which of course is what the Bank of Canada wants.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, too, you got to make it so high that good people are losing their homes, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that balance. So they will make it more difficult to get into a house. And I think what they're trying to do is hit it hard, fast, and quick so that they have to go up to a high interest rate, but within 12 months, Bank of Canada says we should be down to 4% inflation.
Right.
12 months later, we should be down to 2%. Then we'll see rates come back again.
Yeah.
But if you don't make that change, like if you let them stay high, as these mortgages mature, you're going to run into some calamity.
Yeah. So if we look forward though I'm fairly optimistic about looking forward in terms of the inflation rate will come down. Ukraine is not helping obviously, but things will settle down and then mortgage rates will then, I always say housing leads the depression, both going into it and coming out of it.
So the three big areas, food, housing, and fuel. We complain about the cost of gas, but believe it or not, it is cheaper to fill up our gas tank today than it was a year ago.
It's food and shelter.
Yeah,
right?
and shelter is shelter. The national averages as of last week, the average, and averages are dangerous, I know, is 13% cheaper on average in Canada to buy a house excuse me, than it was a year ago. Food, that's the one that's a bit of a question mark.
Yeah.
So wheat is 50% more than it was a year ago. It's 100% more than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I get that because the biggest producer of wheat in the world is Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they've got some pretty big issues they're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
So I completely understand why it costs $5 for a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
The lettuce and the beef, I struggle with that one, John.
Yeah, me too.
Because the borders are now open. It's cheaper to get the stuff shipped in here that from California or Alberta. Our population hasn't doubled. There hasn't been any mad cow disease. Why are we paying what we pay for beef?
Yeah.
So I think it's fair for the government to take a look at these things and find out if there is a degree of price fixing. I think that's a legitimate. Maybe the answer is no. Maybe there's institutional impairments that cause
I believe there must be. But if I look at food in particular.
Well, my farmer clients aren't getting rich. I don't see them driving, fancy cars, and so I'm scratching my head.
Yeah.
And if you believe Galen Weston in his parliamentary committee last week, he's saying they're working on the same margin. So to me, it's a legitimate public policy question that we should ask because
I agree
fuel's
with that.
cheaper.
Yeah.
Housing is cheaper, and we need to look at why. We might not even be able to do anything about it because if you own a grocery store, you can sell a loaf of bread for $100 if you want to.
Yeah.
But.
So that all being said, is that where are the opportunities right now, and from both of you, as like looking at BC, northern BC, I still believe that here in the north we are still on the threshold of growth.
Yes.
For a number of reasons that COVID contributed to that in a way, as that not wanting to live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
The one is taking an hour and a half to drive to work and coming back home. The other one is because of the quality of living there. If I look at an area like Prince George and this region in particular, with all the, and you guys love the lakes because you got a place on the lake.
We do.
And, and a lot of other people do too. We got probably 50 or 100 lakes within 50 miles from here, all around us. It's an amazing place to live. A little bit more snow than I like actually this winter, but
You can go now. I'm done with the snow now. You can go.
But the climate is not bad. And especially not if you look to the other places. Live in California, or in you got 3 feet of snow and and somewhere in the States
parts of California,
Yeah,
right?
parts of California,
Just off
snow.
LA and is it Burbank?
Yeah.
but
Burbank.
what opportunities do you guys see in northern BC?
Well, I think to look at the newer opportunities, like we already know, as you're well aware of, the things that are in forestry, and there's going to be some transition there. And what does that transition look like, right? I mean, that's something you'd be far better dialed in than I would be. But the world is moving to electronic vehicles. We have in northern BC all the rare earth minerals to make them, right? What we need to create is a progressive permitting system that we can get sensible, well-run mines opened efficiently and profitably. Right. And the average miner in British Columbia, by the way, makes $150,000 a year. They pay for a lot of hospitals and schools. So let's give some thought to some thoughtful mining process. And to be fair, there was recently in northern BC a mine that that was just permitted. I don't remember all the details, but I remember the permit was approved last week.
Artemis Gold.
Artemis Gold. So
south of Vancouver.
Yeah.
So I think
open pit mine.
Yeah.
Huge.
They got their permit though, which is great.
Yeah.
I think mining generally is an area of opportunity. I think oil and gas, if you're serious about making the world's environment better, this 2 words, natural gas.
Natural gas.
If you can shut down the 12,000 coal-fired burning plants in China. And replace it with our natural gas. I mean, think what that would do to for the planet.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're allowed to make some money off that too.
Yeah.
So that will mean pipelines, and that will mean a final and thoughtful reconciliation with our friends in the First Nations community. But we've got to do what we've got to do to get that moving. So I see mining, I see natural gas. I also saw, and I don't know if you haven't talked to him, he'd be a really interesting guy, Ken James with the Pacific Olefins deal. And I don't understand the science.
Who's that?
Ken James.
Okay.
The Pacific Olefins, it was taking the natural gas, but there's certain, I don't know the science, but there's certain gases you can take off the gas.
He talked about that already quite a number of years ago.
Yeah.
And they had ideas about developing a plant here.
They did.
And then it went off the track.
There's a land use. It doesn't take a lot of space, and it's net negative carbon, not neutral. It's negative. It takes the bad carbon out.
So would that extract it from the natural gas?
Right. So you got to hook up to the pipeline.
It would have been good.
4 or 5 things he can take out of that and resell. Because here's the irony: is that we send the natural gas over to China. They do this.
They do it,
and they sell it back to us.
Yeah.
So if we see industry in transition, like forestry, maybe a degree of diversification isn't all bad. But northern BC, we're a cost-effective place to live.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I don't know why, as a government policy, we're subsidizing people to live in Vancouver.
Yeah.
Right. We're gonna give you a subsidy to live down there. Well, Prince George is kind of nice. Kamloops is lovely. Fort St. James is a
Terrace is great.
These are all great places.
You see, some of the things that I don't understand, and I've been talking about for a long time, is that there is so much opportunity for industry here in northern BC. The problem, now I'm not only talking forestry now, but all around across the board, is that we need, and even our company, right from day one, 50 years ago when I started it, we have a shortage of a skilled workforce, and there is not enough skills training here. And although I got involved with the college and the Trade and Technology Center, but that alone.
But we need more of that, right?
Yeah.
We need more of that.
Right.
And then not all that long ago, in the last couple of months, I guess there was an announcement BCIT was going to add another $270 million to their location in Vancouver, or Burnaby, whatever it is. And the forest industry, the three major companies contributed $2.5 million to it.
In Burnaby.
Yeah, was it in Burnaby?
I don't know. I was
Yeah,
asking.
where BCIT is. I did a presentation here to a group of people, and my God, this place is huge. I think they got something like 40,000 students.
Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable. But I'm saying, hey guys, why spend $270 million to make it even bigger? Put it in Prince George or in the region here.
Well, look at the Alberta model. They have SAIT and NAIT.
Yeah.
Right. They have a Southern Institute of Technology and they have a Northern Institute
Yeah.
of Technology.
Smart.
And you can both learn health sciences there. I mean, just imagine putting. I have two kids in university, so I know the costs.
Yeah.
But you know the cost to put two kids in university up here. I have a daughter in Boston, and I've got a son going to UMBC. I can tell you who's affordable education and who's got unaffordable education.
Exactly.
So I think it's a competitive opportunity, and I think that it's nuts to expand. BCIT is a wonderful institution.
It should be up here, though.
But why does it all have to be? Isn't it the same argument?
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, and then, but then for the major industry, Canfor was all due respect to Canfor, West Fraser, Interfor, and some other ones were involved in it, and together they put together $2.5 million. Well, I contributed $1 million to a technology center here as the seed money to get it started. That was about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm still talking about it whenever the opportunity presents itself. But I think that for us is the next step because when we opened the John A. Brink Trades and Technology Center, the presentation that I did then, I said, it will not be resources that will stop development here. It will not be infrastructure, railroads,
land-based,
roads.
we got it
We
all,
have
yeah.
all of that. We have the material. We have the entrepreneurs that are interested in investment. We have it all. We have location, but the deterrent will be access to a skilled workforce.
You know, and we've got all the ingredients, right? I mean,
do,
we've got people that don't really want to live down south anymore.
No.
We have a university, we have a college,
Yeah.
we have some pretty smart people living up here.
Exactly.
And we've got the land base. Do you think there's the political will that, like, when I look at why smart decisions aren't made, I ask myself, why? You know, quio bono, who benefits, right? Why? Maybe it's easier just to expand an existing school, and I get that. And perhaps if you're in charge of running the campus and your world gets made bigger, then that's a degree of job security in that. But is the current provincial government, the current Minister of Advanced Education, would they look at a Northern Institute of Technology in BC, which, by the way, John Bowman was a huge advocate at when he was the president of CNC. I haven't heard it since he left and went to Vancouver Island, but I think he was a great president of that college.
No question about it.
And where'd that go? Like, who's the champion of that anymore? Or I think of all that great work that went into 30 years ago when we founded UNB. Remember all that?
Yeah.
Everybody paying $5 to get behind it.
Absolutely.
And we had a blue ribbon panel of men and women who articulated the need.
And then we want to, and I was writing president then of the writing here, and and we want of the Socrates writing, and we want all together down to Penticton, to the AGM. We had buttons, we had flags, and we were not going to be denied. We wanted to get the funding of a freestanding university in Northern BC. That's what made it happen.
Well, and here's a cool part of that story too, John. I think you'll remember this. It was bipartisan. If you talk,
absolutely.
I once sponsored dinner. I had Mike Harcourt and Bruce Strachan at it, and it was kind of interesting because they both sat on opposite aisles. But Bruce kind of told the story, and Mike was there.
Yeah.
He said, in the last days of the social credit government, when he said, I had a meeting with him, and I said, look, even if we don't form government, which of course is what happened, but make this happen? And Harcourt said, absolutely. So the NDP were the one that actually cut the ribbon.
Yeah.
Right? They were the government of the day when they came up here. It was initiated by the Social Credit.
Yeah.
And it was advanced and supported subsequently, of course, by the Liberal government in opposition. So,
Yeah.
but when we all work together, right, there's the cool part of the story.
Yeah.
When they put kind of the partisanship aside, and they, I went to a meeting, and you mentioned Shirley. I went to a Chamber of Commerce breakfast yesterday, and Shirley Bond, actually, in part of her speech, she was talking about one or two issues where she worked with, and because in opposition, you can't do all the stuff you want to, but there was a couple of issues that she spoke to where she quietly went and talked to the minister on the other side and got a happy resolution. So we know we can do it. UNBC proved that. If you got a good idea whose ideas come, all that needs, I think, is a champion and a thoughtful approach, especially when they're tossing out billions of dollars with no labels attached to it.
Exactly.
So the city of Prince George just got $12 million with no strings attached. So I mean, maybe that should be the genesis for the Northern BC Institute of Technology. I mean, here's the land we wanted. Here's the working model plan we want. Here's what we want the scale model to look like. Here's the focus should be. We don't, and one of the things I think that we make a mistake of doing, especially in local government, is we wait while Victoria hasn't told us we can do it yet. Well, you look at the UNBC model, we defined what we wanted. Exactly. We said how it was going to look like. And then we took a pitch to them. And they tweaked it, and that's fine. They will, because they're writing the check. I get that. But why aren't we leading the charge on that?
I also think we need to bring in an institution again like Initiatives PG. When Heather Olin was in there running that, a lot of things were coming and happening that aren't happening anymore once that's been folded into City Hall. I mean, they do a great job, but it wasn't their wheel well. It wasn't at all. No. So there's that, because the big tent idea, everybody come together, get away with your own personal agendas. That's where exactly things have happened, and that's where the opportunities are, John, and resource, reconciliation, partnering with First Nations. Some of the most successful stuff that's been done is with partnership with the First Nation.
Yeah, no question about that.
I mean, the largest contract, Laurie Ackerman, the ex-mayor of Fort St. John, just signed one of the largest agreements with the Blueberry Nation, big tent thing again. Yeah. And that's what we need to look at doing.
I agree with that, and we can do it, because sometimes it is amazing that if you kind of stand back and see how some of these funding projects work, like with BCIT, then it's not all that complex, it's not all that well thought out. It's simply because there is no other option that is being presented. It doesn't happen, and unless and until we get a small group together and saying, let's make this happen, and then get the buy-in First Nations and communities from all around, and then define it as much as possible, then it will happen. But it will be a key element that if which we must, want to stimulate investment and attract capital, we must address the issue of access to a skilled workforce.
Well, doesn't that almost go full circle back to the analogy that you talked about with going to the bank manager with the if you just say, hey, I've got a great idea, he's going to say, well, that's lovely, thank you very much. If you go, here's my idea, here's my execution plan, here's my draft budget, here's my timeline on my Gantt chart, and now you're going to say yes or no to this. You can tweak it all you want, but at some point you're going to have to find a good reason to say no. And when we do that as a community, we always win. We know that from history.
You see, one of the challenges that we have is that we got I like Simon, a brand new mayor, a brand new council, to a certain extent. They would be supportive. First Nations is getting really organized more so, and I'm interviewing quite a few of them. I do a keynote presentation to First Nations in Telkwa the end of this month, I think.
Nice.
A whole group of First Nations. I'm being more and more involved there. The College of New Caledonia, Dennis, Harper is leaving the president of, so we have somebody new involved. But it is a question of getting communities and regions together in the different groups.
Yeah.
But I think, that's the next thing that we have to do.
Well, who leads that, right? And that's not a flippant question,
yeah.
right? That's a very tactical question.
Yeah.
We had where it worked again, and I use the UNBC example. We had a group of local volunteers that came together. So I think.
But what it was substantially, Dan, was that we started making presentations all around the region.
Right.
Murray Sadler was involved, Tom Testament, and a number of other people were all involved in that. Yeah. And then, including myself as the riding president, Prince George North, and we brought the group together, and then from there on in expanded. It has to start with, getting interest, by First Nations and communities,
Absolutely.
especially now we're seeing what is happening in the forest industry, and starting then from there to build it, and then put structure to it, a business plan, if you wish, and making sure that that's fitted, this fit, that fits, and but the time is now.
And reverse engineer it. Like right now, we can talk, and it's a very thoughtful discussion, what the city would look like if we had this new attraction, this new tool, if you will, for success. Also look at what happens if the answer is no, because there's outcomes to say no to things, just as there's outcomes to say yes to things. Imagine if you went back in time and we didn't have UNBC in Prince George.
Yeah.
What would just stop for what it would look like, the dynamic,
inconceivable.
The social character.
Yeah.
It was critical. CNCs, UNBC. Another thing that I found interesting is that I did a podcast with Salen, from Canadian Tire, Alpine, and one of the discussions that we talked about is saying that I also have a company, it's interior warehousing, and that's expanding quite rapidly, and and because I see great potential in warehousing and logistics for Northern BC. So I said to Salen during that podcast, that just wanted to make sure that the public understands how these big companies work, and that. So what happens with all the stuff they order? Well, it usually comes a lot from Asia, goes into Vancouver, then goes to Calgary. Another big portion of it goes to Toronto.
East,
and then from there on in it comes all the way back.
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, send it here.
Yeah, we'll divvy it up.
And we'll build it. But so that's one of the things that makes logical sense if you think about it. And I just used it as an example during the podcast because people listen to it and say, I didn't know that. Yeah. Saying it's 4 days shorter, to bring it here from China than it would be the other way around into the U.S. Midwest. And so there's all kinds of logic as to why we should be developing more of a warehouse and logistic system here as part of what will it all look like.
Well, we've got the rail, we've got the airport, we have the lands around the airport. I mean,
there was talk from Amazon in Vancouver. They were looking up here for a warehouse. Amazon.
Yeah, and they built one in Sydney.
Yeah.
I drive by there virtually every weekend. It's a massive warehouse.
I believe it.
And saying, oh my God. Well, that's another example, Roberta.
I think an important part for all of this, though, gentlemen, is that there's got to be key points. Like, we live in a social media world where people from the ages of 16 to 32, maybe even older, get the majority of their information there. If we don't, I hate to use the word dumb it down, but if we don't make it in simple, quick words, these concepts, because people aren't as fortunate to sit down and talk to two gentlemen like you and hear the ins and outs of stuff. So it really needs to be put out there for people to understand.
I agree.
Because I've seen a lot of people get all upset and go to regional meetings and have, signs against it when they really don't understand that it would be better for the town and better for the region. So there's got to be that big component.
Maybe we have to spend some more time on this and say,
I think it's a great discussion.
A bit more on this. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing that you already know this, that
you're a famous author.
So I worked on a book for a long time, that it took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to write it, or to think about it, and 2 years to write it. And,
did you find it cathartic? Did you find it cathartic? Like actually, the notion of writing it, was that kind of like a bit of a healthy thing? You know, how did you find like a painful experience?
Well, I went through it. Now you have to realize that I was not a success story in academically. I failed grade 3 once and grade 7 3 times, and then they said, "What are you going to do with this guy? Send him to mentally challenged school, or but I always was a good writer, and amazingly, and and then it was a bit of a challenge until I kind of figured out what was my problem. It was not so much that I didn't have the brains or the ideas, but that I had, and that led to the other book, and that is this one.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I'm a classic example of ADHD, and and how that all happened is I was already 57 years old when I walked into the store on 4th Avenue here, and I picked up this book, not this one, but it was called Driven to Distraction, and I looked in it, and I don't know why, and it started talking about ADHD, and I said, "Oh my God, that's me."
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I kept looking at the book and looking at the book. The guy that owned the store came up and said, "Will you buy it or what?" So
You've only read it 3 times.
and obviously I bought it, and then I wrote in it in Dutch. Now I finally know who I am, but it took me 5 years before I even talked to my own doc. Dr. Carey, was my doc, and lived my 2 daughters, and and he was a friend, and but then already I knew I had ADHD, but I was worried about it. What am I going to do? Go to the bank and saying I want to borrow from you X amount of millions of dollars and or $100,000, but I'm pretty good, but I have ADHD, which is a mental problem, right? So and he said, "Have a nice day," right? Not so now, obviously, but
you're in good company.
I think that's alone.
But this book is not a hurrah, John, how well he did, but more about, in spite of all of that, never give up, and stay the course, and all those kind of things. And then from that flowed this book, ADHD. I felt I had an obligation to write this one, and the same as this one, very popular. Did you get a book like that?
I got that one. I don't have that one.
Yeah.
I've read that.
That one's on our coffee table.
Huh?
That one's on our coffee table.
Did I sign it?
I believe you did.
Mine you did, yes. We had we had lunch with Kevin Falcon.
Okay. Can I give you one of these then?
Oh,
Yes,
we'd
please.
be honored. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
And I'll sign it.
And you're
And then I'm writing another one that is coming out in July.
Oh, really?
And that is Finding Your Passion,
Oops, sorry.
Living the Dream. It's so many people, that always wanted to, that made choices in their life, and they don't like their job, so.
Well, thank you.
Find your purpose, right?
Yeah, and
Well, he'll never give it to me now that you signed it personally to him.
Dank u wel. That's my.
thank you.
That's my limited Dutch that I know.
All I can say is tack samika.
Well, you do when you clean it up.
Always do.
So the other one that is coming out in July, I'll get you a copy of that one too. And this one for you,
That'd be
Roberta.
great. Thank you. Thank you.
And then I'm going to do one more after that, at least one more, and that one is saying, what would that one be? Well, I say living young, dying old.
Perfect.
Oh, that is good.
And the whole idea there is
Yeah.
the obvious, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Saying, how can I grow old and still enjoy life and stay healthy and fit mentally and physically?
Yeah.
And
Good for you.
enjoy life, for what it is, So.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you for that. We have a presentation to make too, by the way. So I know thank you for that. And I have to tell you, like, Roberta was the one that said I had to wrap this, but she actually wrapped it. But and I was going to say it's a presentation, but this year our little company sponsors the Commonwealth Cup.
Right.
And the Commonwealth Cup this year will raise, our total will be over $500,000 in
Wow.
charity that we've raised.
Wow.
We're very proud of that. We sponsor it with the Vancouver Canuck alumni come up, and we have a great time.
Right.
Our charity this year is Hospice House, and they
Okay.
do terrific work, as you know,
Yeah.
in town. And last year we made over $46,000
Right.
with the net. That's not the gross. That's the
Right.
net. And but next year marks our 20th anniversary. and this was our 19th anniversary since we founded. But we were going through our records. Roberta was pulling up the files because this is the time of the year where we phone people up and say, you know who the very first person was to sponsor your golf tournament? They said it was John Brink. So we got, this is the first one we've done with these. So you'll have to open it or else Roberta will be upset.
my
It's right
goodness.
it's in the center.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my
just keep going.
goodness.
It's not in the box.
It's not, oh, it's not, oh, you got
It's
a
not
box.
in the
but
box.
It's not in the
It's
box.
in the box if you want the box, but it's in there still. There you go.
Oh my goodness.
So I know that you
I
have
love
a trophy wall in your
Yeah.
office of all your
Yeah, we
reserve
do.
stuff.
Oh, thanks, guys. Really.
So you're our very, very first sponsor.
Yeah.
And here we are almost 20 years
So
later.
I show it to our guests that are watching, and thank you very much,
You're
guys.
very
So
welcome.
thank
Well, you were the genesis
I'm going to give
of
you a
our
big hug
success.
after.
Yes,
you,
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for having you.
Yeah.
It's
well,
been great
thank you for
being
having
here.
us.
Thanks.
Thank you.